This is the Terracotta Army. 8,000 warriors buried over 2,000 years ago.
For more than 2 millennia, the Terracotta Army stood in eerie silence, thousands of lifelike soldiers trapped in time, guarding the tomb of a brutal emperor. But now, the silence has been shattered. Scientists have finally cracked the cryptic, ancient writings inscribed into their armor and weaponry. What they discovered wasn't an eulogy, or a record of battles, it was a warning. An unsettling, mysterious message that turns everything we believe to be true about China's first emperor on its head. What was found, exactly? Come along with us in this video as we unveil the decoded inscription. For a long, long time, humans were most concerned with the grand things when it came to the Terracotta Army. They gazed at the thousands of statues. They learned about the lines of soldiers, the horses, the chariots, and the weapons. They spoke of the emperor's tomb in the distance. But something small, something not so easy to see, began to get noticed over time. These were not grand or easy to see things. They were extremely small marks. These small marks, or inscriptions as some referred to them, were discovered in areas you wouldn't expect. They were concealed under the feet of the statues, in the rear of armor plates, within hollow sections of the body, and even on the inside sections of the limbs. No one initially thought that these markings were significant when they were noticed. Most individuals simply thought they were little stamps to indicate which worker did what. Perhaps they were inventory marks or numbers to assist in the tracking of the work. That is what individuals felt at first. However, once some time had passed, individuals began to realize that there was something about them that didn't add up. The more that these marks were examined, the more odd they appeared. Some of the symbols didn't look similar to any writing that was known at the time of the Qin dynasty. There were some which appeared only once, on one statue, and never at all afterward. Others were odd-looking or were scratched in very strange places, places where no one would even look unless they destroyed the statue. That made it very difficult to examine them. Actually, there wasn't much that people could do for many years. The statues were too fragile, and it wasn't possible to simply break them open to see what was inside. So, these odd little marks remained largely untouched and quietly disregarded for many years. None of these speculations were ever seriously considered for many years. Most folks avoided the subject. But then technology intervened. New devices enabled the examination of the statues in ways previously impossible. With multispectral imaging, scientists could make out symbols the human eye couldn't perceive. The secret marks surfaced under various types of light. Some were worn away, others only visible with special lenses. The most significant change resulted when artificial intelligence was employed. With machine learning, computers were taught to learn and compare all of the symbols. These computers were able to recognize patterns that humans were not. They were taught by known characters from the Qin dynasty, and even predating that, writing styles. They were categorized by location, by type of statue, by direction, and by pit. Gradually, a bigger picture began to emerge. The task was no longer merely to gather the marks. Now the purpose was to know what they really meant. As soon as the first full translations arrived, they surprised and unsettled. These were not names merely. They were not workshop codes. Some were personal. Some were emotional. And a few were even painful. There was no respect or calm tone. It was laced with fear. One saying, repeated everywhere, went, built on pain. It wasn't outward. It was always concealed, within a torso, beneath a plate, in an area no one could readily look at. Another inscription within a statue of a high-ranking officer read, "He took my name and burned it in stone." No one knew whether it was a metaphor or an actual grievance of a worker. Either way, it did not sound like anything within standard Qin texts. What if those odd marks were not random symbols or workshop tags, and were actually part of something much larger, buried right before their eyes? In the 90s, a small group of researchers started speaking, but in whispers. They didn't release anything officially. They didn't shout it out. They simply began exchanging muted thoughts and weird concepts. One linguist in a regional team had a thought. He felt that a few of the recurring symbols had a rhythm, as in the recitation of a chant. He told them that they reminded him of ancient spoken rites. To him, perhaps the markings were not meant to be read in silence. Perhaps they were meant to be verbalized, perhaps even during a ritual. If it was so, perhaps the true intent was to trap spirits within the statues. The statues would then be immortal, protecting the emperor, even after death. Another scholar, one who examined very ancient Taoist texts, had something else to say. He believed that the symbols resembled pieces of spiritual spells. The spells, according to him, were employed in the past to prevent souls from returning or doing harm. He was convinced that some generals and high-ranking statues carried symbols corresponding to particular lines from an old ritual designed to trap lost souls. He even suspected whether the trapped souls were the workers who perished constructing the army. It was a terrible idea, but one that constantly circulated. And there was an even more radical theory. It never once made it into print. It was just passed around in whispers, or messages. It stated the marks were not merely messages on a single statue, but pieces of a greater design. Like a puzzle. If you looked at all the marks collectively, across every pit, they could collectively create some sort of big ritual map. Some people thought the markings were spells inscribed in a specific sequence across the whole site. This sequence, they averred, would be intended to govern or seal something deeper buried, maybe inside the emperor's sealed tomb. But again, none of that was proved. And the people who spoke of these things eventually went silent. Some left their work. Others never brought it up again. Even before modern tools were used, there were rumors. Stories that some people had tried to learn more by taking direct steps. In the early 1980s, there was talk of a team in Xi'an that secretly opened a few damaged statues. They were searching for concealed inscriptions within the torsos. A lab assistant later asserted the project came to a very abrupt end. Some of the team members fell ill. Some others left. No stories were published. The equipment and statues utilized were removed. It was as if the entire operation was wiped off. Then came the 90s when a small university group attempted something different. They used sound scanning to check for marks within the statues without opening them. One scientist put up a message on the internet indicating that they observed unusual patterns of echoes. He indicated that it sounded like tiny secret spaces within the clay. He also mentioned that some of the marks were located in places where tools or light could not penetrate. That message was later erased, and the project was never followed up. In the early 2000s, they were discussing a foreign group that analyzed the symbols with special mathematical tools known as frequency analysis. They were cryptographers, individuals who translate secret writing. They interpreted one recurring pattern as buried alive for eternity. Shortly after, they had to leave the country. The excuse was visa issues, but everyone thought it had something to do with what they found. If such trends and repressed theories were intentionally withheld from the public, what other underlying secrets were forces and powers so keen to conceal? As more and more statues were examined, something else was occurring. Individuals began observing that the patterns of the markings didn't have any obvious meaning. For instance, soldiers who were standing directly next to one another may have totally dissimilar symbols. Some of them had many markings, whereas others had none at all. In certain parts, the marks seemed to occur more frequently, whereas in others, they hardly appeared at all. Other experts felt perhaps this was odd, but others were not so certain. They thought perhaps there was a plan or scheme to the way that the marks were arranged. Individuals attempted to cluster the symbols in an effort to locate a style. But rather than discovering anything, they were more perplexed. Some of the marks were definitively written in the time's official style of writing, called Qin seal script. These were the simpler ones to read. They tended to appear to be referring to workshops or perhaps the supervisors' names. But the other symbols weren't like that at all. Some of them were distorted versions of recognized characters. Some were nothing like writing. there were ones that had no rules to follow. That's when people began to question, perhaps these weren't merely marks for systematizing the work. Perhaps they represented something else, something more profound. Researchers also employed 3D laser scanning to survey statues from all sides. The scans revealed minute carvings in hard-to-access places. For the first time, experts were able to collect thousands of inscriptions without touching or damaging the statues. On another examined statue, a broken one on the lip of one of the pits, there was a message under the left arm. It read, "Here lies death and those who served it." The stanza was preceded by odd broken symbols that could not be read well. The most chilling message of all appeared in a kneeling archer's foot. It was only revealed because of high-resolution 3D scanning. The message read, "I worked until my hands broke. Let him walk over me forever." Some thought it was a lament of pain by a worker who handled the statues. Others thought it was an expression of great loyalty, but the tone was heavy, dark, and mournful. All these messages stopped experts in their tracks. What they were witnessing was not the grand tribute they had envisioned. The Terracotta Army was not merely about honor or power. Now it seemed likely that most of the people who succeeded were hurting. And they could have left their voices behind, quietly, secretly, inscribed into the clay. Previous dismissed, these small, hidden messages were now causing everyone to double-check and raise new questions. Perhaps the soldiers weren't simply guarding a great emperor. Perhaps they were guarding something else as well, something that had been concealed for millennia. Was the discovery of a warrior the key to learning at last about the nature of the deeper conspiracy suggested by the hidden inscriptions and messages? An astonishing new find revealed by a team of archaeologists in 2025 is already changing popular attitudes toward China's famous Terracotta Army. For more than 40 years, most scholars believed that this army of full-sized clay warriors was actually a spiritual creation, designed to protect Emperor Qin Shi Huang in the afterlife. But this new discovery is causing researchers to reconsider. The find was made within Pit 2, one of the big underground pits where much of the soldiers of clay were discovered. While Pit 1 is the most famous and contains thousands of soldiers standing in orderly rows, Pit 2 is more intricate. It contains various classes of soldiers standing in particular ways that exhibit some sort of plan or design. While working in Pit 2, the team uncovered something that hadn't been visible for over 30 years, a new terracotta general. This general is extremely rare. Indeed, he is only the 10th general ever to be found within the entire army. His discovery was significant because generals were significant leaders and were not placed anywhere in the pit. This general was located in a very significant position, at the very center of a command area. Elitist soldiers and special chariots surrounded him. The position he was in indicated that he had been put in charge of something significant. It is believed by researchers that this arrangement might have been similar to how actual armies were formed during the reign of Emperor Qin. Other experts go so far as to believe the army was not only a spiritual invention but could actually be a reproduction of an actual battle plan